Across the Middle Ages, nothing projected dominance and survival quite like the towering silhouette of a medieval castle. These structures were far more than noble residences. They were fortified machines, engineered stone by stone to resist invasion, control territory, and keep entire communities alive under siege. What now stands as weathered ruins was once a complex defensive organism where every doorway, staircase, and battlement served a precise strategic purpose. Imagine approaching one of these strongholds as an invading army. Before you stands a fortress designed not simply to slow you down, but to crush your advance at every step. A drawbridge that snaps upward in moments. Barriers of timber and iron built to withstand relentless battering. Murder holes poised above narrow passages, ready to rain destruction onto anyone trapped below. Towers that provide sweeping lines of fire, and walls arranged not in a single ring but in a deadly sequence of defensive layers. In this video, we're going to rebuild what might be called the ultimate medieval castle, a composite fortress that blends the most ingenious defensive ideas from the 11th to the 14th century. Step by step, we'll trace the path an attacker would face, from the outermost approaches to the final refuge at the center, the keep, a stone citadel designed to be nearly impossible to take. And you're watching. Here, we break down the engineering behind the world's most remarkable structures past and present, to uncover the brilliance hidden within their design. Prepare yourself, because once we enter this fortress, every layer of stone tells a story of strategy, survival, and centuries of warfare. To understand why medieval castles became such formidable structures, we have to return to a time when Europe was fractured, turbulent, and constantly under threat. After the collapse of the Carolingian Empire in the late 9th century, central authority across Western and Central Europe crumbled. What emerged was a patchwork of regional lords, each responsible for defending their own lands, administering justice, and safeguarding the people who lived under their protection. This shift in power was driven not only by political instability but by external danger. Waves of invaders pressed into Europe from every direction. Viking raiders struck from the north, Magyars advanced from the east, and Muslim forces challenged from the south. With no unified empire to defend them, communities turned to their local rulers for security. And in response, those rulers built the first true defensive strongholds of the medieval world. The earliest castles appearing in the 10th century were simple motte and bailey designs. A wooden tower perched on a raised earth mound provided a watchful vantage point, while an enclosed courtyard below held livestock, supplies, and workers. These early fortifications were fast to construct and offered basic protection, but they were vulnerable to fire, rot, and determined attackers. By the 12th century, however, castle building evolved into a sophisticated science. Wood gave way to stone, walls thickened dramatically, gatehouses turned into fortified choke points, towers grew larger, stronger, and more strategically placed. And then came the pinnacle of medieval military architecture, the concentric castle, a fortress designed with multiple rings of defense, each one able to support the next. Inspired largely by Norman ambition and Crusader experience, these fortifications were engineered to force attackers into a gauntlet of deadly obstacles. Yet castles were more than military strongholds. They were also political centers, administrative hubs, and self-contained communities. Inside their walls, people lived, worked, prayed, traded, and survived. A castle was both a home and a symbol, a physical expression of a lord's power and responsibility. This blend of social purpose and military innovation set the stage for the ultimate medieval fortress we are about to explore. Approaching a fully developed medieval fortress was nothing like charging toward a simple stone wall. A true concentric castle forced invaders into a brutal sequence of challenges, each more dangerous than the last. Every structure, every turn, slope, doorway, and opening was designed with one purpose: to break the momentum of an attacking army and wear them down long before they reached the heart of the castle. Let's follow the exact route an army would face, beginning at the outermost defenses. The Barbican, the first trap. Long before an attacker reached the main gate, they confronted the Barbican, a fortified outpost positioned like a shield before the entrance. It served two roles: delay the enemy and expose them. Built as a small but heavily fortified enclosure, the Barbican forced invaders into a narrow approach. Long, angled walls guided attackers in predictable lines of movement, allowing defenders on the ramparts and towers to fire from safe positions. Even before reaching the castle's actual gatehouse, enemies were already under fire from arrows, bolts, and stones raining down from above. In many designs, the Barbican included its own small gate, battlements, and arrow slits, essentially a mini-fortress meant to trap, rotate, and slow the incoming force. Breaking through this first obstacle was already costly. The moat, a barrier of water and earth. Just beyond the Barbican awaited one of the most iconic features of medieval defense, the moat. While moats are often imagined as picturesque water-filled trenches, their true purpose was entirely strategic. A moat, whether dry or filled with water, served to prevent siege towers from reaching the walls, break the charge of cavalry or infantry, stop battering rams before they could make contact, block tunneling attempts, as waterlogged soil could not be reliably undermined. For attackers, crossing the moat was a nightmare. If dry, it required filling with earth and timber under enemy fire. If wet, it meant constructing makeshift bridges or floating platforms, all while archers and crossbowmen above unleashed continuous volleys. At the far end of the moat stood the next obstacle, the drawbridge. The drawbridge, a gate that fought back. The drawbridge served as both the official entrance to the castle and a mechanical barrier that could seal the fortress within seconds. Several types existed across medieval Europe, and each one complicated an attacker's plan. A. The basic chain-operated drawbridge. The simplest type used heavy chains connected to pulleys above the gatehouse. Turning a windlass lifted the bridge, folding it upright against the entrance. When raised, this vertical barrier became a reinforced wall, often lined with iron. B. The counterweight drawbridge. Larger castles required sturdier solutions. Here, the drawbridge was balanced with massive counterweights hidden inside the gatehouse. As defenders turned the winding mechanism, the weights fell, making it far easier to lift an otherwise enormous wooden platform. C. The bascule bridge. More complex still was the bascule bridge, which pivoted downward into a pit beneath the gatehouse. Counterweights positioned on the opposite end ensured smooth, controlled movement. This design prevented enemies from tampering with the underside of the bridge and created an additional drop that attackers had to cross. D. The 14th century pivoting arm system. In later centuries, drawbridges were mounted on long pivoting arms equipped with built-in counterweights, allowing defenders to raise the bridge with minimal effort, sometimes by hand. Crossing a lowered drawbridge was only the beginning. Once attackers set foot on it, they were stepping directly into the next trap. The outer gatehouse. The funnel of death. The gatehouse was the most heavily fortified part of any castle, functioning as an industrial-grade killing zone. Once the drawbridge was crossed, attackers faced a colossal timber gate reinforced with iron, but breaching that door only led them deeper into danger. Battlements and arrow loops. Above the entrance, defenders lined the parapets, firing through arrow slits designed to give them clear angles of attack while keeping them protected behind stone. Machicolations. Projecting stone platforms allowed defenders to drop stones, boiling water, sand, flaming pitch, or arrows straight down onto the trapped invaders. Half-tower gatehouses. Many gatehouses were built open at the rear. If attackers somehow breached the front gate, defenders could still fire into the exposed chamber, preventing the enemy from capturing and using the gatehouse against its owners. Breaking the outer gatehouse was a major achievement, but it was only one step closer to the inner defenses. The outer curtain wall, a climb into chaos. Next came the outer curtain wall, tall enough to dominate the landscape and thick enough to withstand prolonged bombardment. These walls were often sloped at the base using a feature called the talus, which deflected projectiles, pushed ladders into awkward angles, increasing the chance they would snap, prevented siege towers from getting close enough to deploy their bridges. Wooden hoardings might be added atop the walls during sieges to give defenders extra firing positions. Though vulnerable to flames, these structures provided devastating vantage points directly above the attackers, and every few dozen meters, a tower stood waiting. Wall towers. The high ground advantage. Wall towers gave defenders superior flanking positions and uninterrupted lines of fire along the curtain wall. Their shape influenced their effectiveness. Square towers offered more space but had weak corners. Round towers deflected missiles better and resisted undermining. D-shaped towers blended the advantages of both designs. Inside each tower were multiple floors with armories, barracks, storerooms, and elevated firing platforms. Even if attackers scaled the outer wall, they faced yet another fortified structure ahead, the inner gatehouse. The inner gatehouse, the castle's last doorway. This was the strongest gatehouse of all. Its chambers were taller, thicker, and more deadly. Inside the passage, attackers were funneled into brutally narrow corridors. Ambush rooms lined the sides, allowing defenders to shoot through arrow loops. Above, murder holes opened to unleash stones or boiling liquids. Many inner gatehouses also employed multiple portcullises, trapping invaders between them like prey in a cage. If attackers reached the far end of this deadly hallway, they entered the inner bailey bruised, exhausted, and drastically reduced in number. The castle's final lines of defense were still ahead. Crossing the inner gatehouse did not guarantee victory. Instead, attackers found themselves inside the inner bailey, a broad courtyard enclosed by the castle's most formidable curtain walls. Unlike the hostile exterior defenses, this space was the beating heart of everyday life within the fortress. It was designed not only for survival, but for the daily rhythms of a self-sustaining community. Lining the walls were essential structures that kept the castle functioning during both peace and war. The stables housed horses vital for messaging, scouting, and rapid defensive maneuvers. Nearby, carpenter workshops and blacksmith forges produced weapons, repaired armor, and maintained the wooden and metal components of the castle's defenses. These craftspeople were indispensable, especially during extended sieges. The kitchen complex, with storerooms full of grain, salted meat, and preserved foods, supplied the soldiers and inhabitants. Massive ovens and hearths prepared meals not only for the garrison but also for laborers, servants, and occasionally the lord's entourage. At the spiritual center stood the chapel, a space of worship and refuge. In an age when faith shaped every aspect of life, the chapel served both religious and psychological needs, helping maintain morale during crises. Most critical of all was the well, often dug deep into the bedrock to ensure a dependable source of fresh water. Water meant life. A castle with its own well could endure sieges that would starve out lesser fortifications. Life in the inner bailey continued even under attack. But looming above all these buildings was the final refuge, the last redoubt, if every wall and gate fell. The keep. Towering above the inner bailey, the keep, sometimes called the donjon, was the castle's ultimate defensive anchor. It was not merely a residence but a colossal stone sanctuary built to withstand prolonged assault. In many castles, capturing the keep meant capturing the entire fortress. Failing to take it meant the defenders could continue to fight, even if the outer defenses had collapsed. At first glance, the keep appeared almost austere. Its walls were extraordinarily thick, sometimes reaching 3 to 5 meters. Small, narrow windows minimized weak points, making it nearly impervious to arrows, siege engines, or fire. The main entrance was rarely on the ground floor. Instead, it was elevated and reached by a steep staircase or an attached forebuilding, a mini gatehouse guarding the only way in. The forebuilding itself was designed as a defensive gauntlet, with arrow slits, barricaded doors, and sometimes even a small drawbridge. If attackers breached it, they were funneled up narrow, winding stairs that drastically slowed their ascent. Inside, the keep was a vertical world of interconnected floors, tied together with spiral staircases that were almost always built to twist clockwise. This clever design favored right-handed defenders descending the stairs, giving them more room to swing their swords. Meanwhile, attackers climbing upward found their weapon arms cramped by the inner wall. The ground floor, storage and survival. The lowest level served primarily as storage for food, dry goods, ale, wine, and sometimes a secondary well. During a siege, these supplies could be the difference between endurance and starvation. While not always inhabited, this floor made the keep function as a self-contained survival bunker. The first floor, the Great Hall. Above the storage level lay the Great Hall, the social and administrative heart of the keep. Here the lord held feasts, settled disputes, received guests, and oversaw affairs of the estate. Some great halls spanned 2 floors, with towering ceilings and galleries embedded within the walls, allowing defenders to fire down if the hall was ever breached. Upper floors, private quarters and comfort. The floors above housed the solar, the private living quarters for the lord and his family. These rooms were warmer, better lit, and more elaborately decorated. Nearby were guest chambers, used for visiting nobles or important allies. A small private chapel was often included, along with garderobes, medieval toilets that channeled waste through vertical shafts, sometimes directly into the moat. The roof, the final battlefield. At the very top, the roof was ringed with battlements, offering panoramic surveillance of the surrounding landscape. If the enemy breached every wall, gate, and chamber below, defenders could still retreat to the rooftop to make their final stand. The keep symbolized the ultimate fusion of practicality and power, residence, fortress, and command center in one. If the keep fell, the castle fell. But as long as it stood, hope remained. For centuries, medieval castles represented the height of defensive engineering. But by the 15th century, a revolutionary force would render even the strongest stone walls obsolete. Gunpowder artillery. Cannons fundamentally changed the rules of warfare. A wall that could withstand arrows, siege towers, and battering rams could not endure the relentless pounding of cast iron cannonballs. What once took weeks or months to breach could now be shattered in hours. High, vertical walls, the trademark of medieval fortification, became vulnerabilities rather than strengths. They cracked easily under sustained bombardment, and towers that once served as elevated vantage points became large, rigid targets. The age of towering stone keeps and curtain walls was coming to an end. In response, military architects developed a new type of fortification, the bastion fort, also known as the star fort. These low, angled walls were designed to deflect cannon fire, not resist it head-on. Earth-filled ramparts absorbed impacts far better than solid stone. Deep, triangular bastions allowed defenders to fire in overlapping arcs, eliminating the blind spots that plagued circular towers. As warfare modernized, the purpose of castles shifted. No longer suited for military defense, they became administrative centers, noble residences, or simply symbols of dynastic prestige. Aristocrats favored the more comfortable and elegant chateau, a grand estate meant for display rather than battle. Many medieval castles were abandoned or fell into ruin. Others were remodeled, repurposed, or preserved as historical landmarks. Their military relevance faded, but their cultural and architectural legacy endured. Today, the remains of medieval castles stand not only as reminders of past battles but as monuments to human ingenuity. Every stone, gate, and tower reflects a world shaped by conflict, hierarchy, and the relentless pursuit of survival. These fortresses reveal how medieval engineers transformed raw materials into sophisticated defensive systems, layered, interlocking, and astonishingly effective for their time. By tracing the path of an attacker through our reconstructed ultimate castle, we see more than just walls and weapons. We glimpse the strategic thinking, resourcefulness, and sheer determination of the people who built and defended these mighty strongholds. Though gunpowder ended their reign, the genius of medieval castle design continues to inspire architects, historians, and storytellers alike. If you enjoyed this journey into the heart of medieval fortification, be sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Which castle feature impressed you the most?